So, Jagmeet Singh, leader of the NDP.
Hi, I'm really excited to do this.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here in my apartment. Like, look at that.
Very
We're
cool.
we're keeping it chill. We're super,
You could have
going with
told
the
them this is a
flow.
fancy. You could have told them this was a fancy studio because it looks really nice.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
my apartment is a really expensive studio that I pay a lot of money every month for. So we can talk about that. So I guess the first thing I really wanted to ask you about is, I was in the press gallery for like 7, 8 years. By the way, if you guys hear little baby noises in the background, we got a little guest here.
Yes, my daughter is in the house, so she is come to work with Daddy Day, and so she might be making a little bit of squeaks in the background.
Yeah, so it's very cute. Okay, but the thing I wanted to ask you about is, personally, I noticed a change in how people talk on the Hill in the last, you basically came on the scene around the same time I started reporting on the Hill. So you've been NDP leader for about 7 years, eh? Have you noticed a shift in our political rhetoric and the way that politicians speak about and to each other in the last 7 years? And what has that been?
Yeah, I've noticed things getting more extreme. I've noticed like conservatives using purposefully more inflammatory or divisive language for sure. I think people are in a different place, and people are genuinely feeling a sense of despair and worry that they have not felt before. Like when I first started to now, there's certainly a much like more intense feeling that like I can't get ahead. Like I met a woman yesterday at the event that I was at, and she said, I'm doing everything right. Like I got a good job, I got a good education, and I can't take any vacation. All I do is work. I barely have time for myself. And I feel like I'm doing everything right, but I can't get ahead. That is someone who is capturing what a lot of people feel like.
So I guess I kind of want to jump around here because you just mentioned that, like, there is that feeling and that frustration about really, I mean, the StatsCan just came out with the worst wealth inequality. They just said that Canada has reached the worst wealth inequality that they've seen since they started recording it. How do you reckon with the anger and the ways in which Canadians are expressing that and, try to keep people feeling hope?
First is acknowledge it's real. Like that those stats are describing what people are actually going through. So when people say that they're having the hardest time ever, like it's true, they are. Like they can't afford their groceries, rent is so expensive, like everything is so tough. But it's not so tough for everybody. On the other end of it, the richest CEOs and the wealthiest folks in our country are making more money than ever before. So that gap is becoming more and more real. So people start to say, well, why is it that the corporate grocery store that I go to is making record profits, but I can't afford the groceries I need? And I think that's where we say, you know what, you're right to question that. And why is it that corporate landlords are buying up all this affordable homes and jacking up rents? You're right to worry about that. And that's where we can actually come in and say, the hope is, let's fix that. Let's fix those problems and we'll make life better for people.
So it was interesting. I asked my followers on Blue Sky if they, had a chance to ask you questions, what they would ask.
Side note: are you enjoying Blue Sky?
I love it.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
so
yeah.
much better. I don't get called horrific words all the time.
I'm so sorry.
Really no, it's fine.
It's rough for you though.
It's rough for all of us.
Yeah. You're super resilient and you're doing great work.
Ditto. But the thing that I saw in the replies that a lot of people were saying was that, they want to see the NDP be more left-wing, be more almost populist, be more of a truly like almost radical party. And I guess I have two questions on that, but the first one I want to ask you is, how do you respond to people who are requesting that, who feel like you're just trying to out-liberal the Liberals?
I would say like we do need to give people a real vision. And a real bold vision of how we can make their lives better. People want to be able to do kind of the basics. You want to be able to have a good job and have one job that should be able to get you enough income so you can get a place to live. You could be able to buy your groceries, hopefully save a bit up so you can go on maybe a special trip with your loved one, your friends, maybe, be able to go out and celebrate every now and then. Like that's what people want. I think that is absolutely achievable. Having healthcare there for you when you need it. And so I've got like big plans to make that happen, but people also want to know, what are you going to do for me concretely that I can imagine? So we're trying to give both those things. So taking the GST off of daily essentials and monthly bills is something that people can say, I can imagine you doing that day two. Like I'm prime minister, I get elected today. Day 2, I take the GST permanently off of your monthly bills for your cell phone, internet, and home heating. That's something people can imagine. Yeah, I can see how that can make my life better. And then I say, you know what we can do to make housing better is let's ban corporations from buying affordable homes. Let's straight up put a ban in place. For food prices, let's put in place a price cap on food essentials so that the price for the essentials that you need cannot continue to be jacked up. These are bold ways to make life more affordable, but also some concrete things that people can imagine on day 2 of me being prime minister.
There's also a lot of anger around, like, frankly, billionaires. I mean, we just saw the reaction to the healthcare CEO being murdered, and people are having a hard time finding sympathy because they say that, you know, in a way, he's actually committing murder all the time through denials. And at the same time, we're seeing a lot of support and kind of mixed feelings about the Canada Post strike. So I guess, do you guys have any plan to tap into that rage towards billionaires, and like what will you do, because it is pretty wild to see the ways in which this inequality is just like worsening and worsening. Like, do you plan to tap into that at all?
Yeah, what we want to do is when people are angry, we want to direct that anger towards a solution. So the difference is when Pierre Poilievre stokes up anger, his goal is to tear it all down. He wants you to no longer believe that we can have a good healthcare system, that we can actually take care of one another. He wants people to not believe in that anymore, that you're better off on your own. I want people to know we are actually way better off. Everyday folks are better off when we take care of each other. The only people that benefit if they're on our own are the billionaires or the super rich. And so I want to direct that anger that people feel that they can't afford their rent to say, well, in big corporations, recently there's a class action lawsuit being started in Canada, already in effect in the States, that large corporate landlords are using AI to effectively price fix the rents for people, jacking up their rent. So they're using technology to rip people off. We know that they're buying up more affordable homes. In the 90s, almost none of the homes were owned, none of the apartment buildings were owned by corporate landlords. And now over 20% of housing in Canada is owned by one of the major corporate landlords. So we're seeing more and more billionaires are making money off our housing, making money off of our illnesses, the privatization of healthcare, and making money by ripping us off at the grocery store. I want to direct that anger to say, well, let's take them on then. Let's take them on with really aggressive strategies like a price cap, like banning corporations from buying homes, and doing that to make life better for people. And then let's also tax them. Like the super rich can afford to contribute more. We saw the UK, Spain, and Germany all put in excess profit taxes really effectively that generated revenue and made the largest and wealthiest corporations pay a bit more. We can do that here in Canada as well.
So one thing I hear you say in interviews a lot, you know, when people ask you about your role in opposition and everything is, you know, we're trying to be prime minister. We want to form government. And, you know, when people ask about elections, that's sort of the answer that you guys tend to give. But, you know, you guys had a ton of power through that deal with the Liberals. You forced a lot of issues that it sounds like the Liberals maybe wouldn't have done without you guys there. But then you tore it up. Why did you do that?
Well, we got a lot of things done. And we were getting to the point where we had achieved the dental care. It was in place. And now we're going to expand it to include everybody that earns less than $90,000. So that was already locked in. Pharmacare, the legislation was passed. Now deals need to get signed. But we had gotten a lot of things done. But it became clear to us that what we needed the government to do was to do things like putting a price cap in or banning corporations from buying homes. They didn't have the will to take on the real root cause that was driving up cost of living for people. They just weren't willing to do those things. So we couldn't be in an agreement anymore. And we wanted to go back to a regular minority government where we look at each bill, go vote by vote. But we couldn't be in a position where we were tied together in that way anymore, given that they weren't willing to do what was necessary to make life better for people.
You mentioned the tie together. One thing that like the Conservatives were nonstop pounding the drum. The Trudeau NDP government, the Trudeau Singh government, the Liberal-NDP coalition, which is, you know, factually incorrect, but still, like, this was going on in their fundraising emails, like every day it was being said. Did that play a role? I mean, the Liberal government is polling terribly right now. Did it play a role in your decision to rip up the deal to try and create that distance?
Well, we're generally, if there's any question that involves did the Conservatives influence us, the answer is probably going to be no, because we have nothing in common. Like, they want to cut pensions for seniors when they can't even afford their groceries. We want to make them better. They want to privatize healthcare so rich companies can make money off of your pain. We want to make it easier to get a doctor. So we don't have anything in common. But what we are focused on is getting that help to people. And we realized we couldn't do it in the agreement anymore. We needed to be in a regular minority situation where we're fighting it out and pushing for changes. And we couldn't be in that agreement given the lack of willingness to take on the problems that we were up against.
Speaking of the Conservatives and the differences between you guys, we are seeing this rage that you mentioned earlier as a result of the inequalities and people's frustration about not being able to afford life. But some of this is manifesting itself in a rise of extremism, a rise of anti-immigrant sentiment, a rise of anti-trans sentiment, just like a lot of hate and a lot of conspiracism too. So when you look at that, and the ways in which certain political leaders are choosing to dog whistle that or outright lean into it, what do you guys like? What is your response to that? I mean, what responsibility do you feel political leaders have in this environment right now?
I think when people are vulnerable because they can't get the basic necessities, like you can't afford your groceries, you're struggling with rent, your bills are so high, then you're more vulnerable to someone saying, you know what, whose fault it is? That person over there, it's their fault. And I feel like people are more vulnerable when their economic conditions, when their just day-to-day lives are so difficult. So I really want to focus on making life more affordable for people, because I know when we can draw that same anger towards real solutions, like we can fix the housing market. It's actually working the way it was intended. For people who are saying like, how does this make any sense? Like look at what the average cost to buy a home and how much people make. Like it just does not add up. This is a housing market designed by liberals and conservatives for one purpose: to make rich investors richer, to make a lot of money for developers. We can change that though. Rules and decisions were made that design the system that hurts people. Let's change that and make it work for people. And so this is where I say, where what we need to do for people who are feeling frustrated and angry, they're being exploited and they're given false reasons why the problems are there. They're pointing to immigrants, pointing to this group or that group, using anger and directing it towards things that are not actually the cause. Like a trans person is not the reason why your rents are so high and your groceries are unaffordable. But that's kind of what the right wing is trying to do, point out this scapegoat or that scapegoat. And our goal is to say, well, the scapegoats are very obvious. Big corporations are ripping you off. You know that when you go to the grocery store, you feel it when you're paying your cell phone bill and you're like, why am I getting all these extra fees added on? And these companies are running basically a monopoly in Canada. There's only a handful of them that run the whole telecommunications market. We want to say, well, that is the problem. Let's direct all of our anger towards fixing the policies that allow them to rip us off. And the liberals and conservatives will never do that. These are their buddies. They're their friends. Like when I talk about the conservatives, Jenny Byrne is their chief strategist. Like that's their number one. Jenny Byrne, who is Pierre Poilievre's number one, is also a chief lobbyist for the biggest corporate landlords, for the biggest corporate grocery stores. They're never going to take on the actual people that are ripping you off. And we're different. We want to take on those folks. We want to make life better.
And, I appreciate that you guys want to take the approach of, hearing people. And like, that's what I'm hearing from your answers here. You're trying to kind of take the anger and point it towards solutions. But there is also this underbelly right now where there is a reality, where there is real transphobia out there, real racism out there. There are white nationalist active clubs that are learning to fight each other in like woods in rural Ontario. Like what... I appreciate the desire to push for that positivity, but at the same time, what do you plan to do about the real undercurrent of hate, and how are you going to protect vulnerable people from that?
Well, I do think a part of the anti-hate kind of strategy is fixing people's day-to-day lives. Like if you fix people's material condition, like they can afford things, it does actually create a healthier society, a safer society when people are able to live a good life. So I think that is a part of the strategy. And then, we have to have specific things to tackle hate. There's online radicalization. We need better protection for people from hate, from messages designed to incite violence towards them, violence against women. Like these are things that are really concrete and we need to tackle them online. Better laws, better protections. Organizations that are promoting hate need to be dismantled. We need to use our security forces to look at groups that are purposely inflaming hatred and violence against other people. Like that can't happen in Canada. So we need to take that seriously as well. And I'm also wanting to look at like the root causes and say, well, what can I do to fix those root causes?
And what will you do to protect people from stuff like the laws that are being passed in Alberta right now, which we know, based on studies, that those kinds of laws cause more trans youth to attempt suicide? So, how do you intend to protect those kids?
A lot of what I'm seeing from conservative premiers who are undermining kind of personal access to health, like a healthcare solution, is supplanting good healthcare with their own opinions. And good healthcare is basically a decision between you and your healthcare provider based on the best evidence. That's what it should be. Whether it's women reproductive rights and access to reproductive health, whether it's trans rights and trans health, these are questions between a person who's struggling with whatever their healthcare issue is and a healthcare provider. It should not be for a premier to give their personal opinion on what the best healthcare outcome is when professionals should be the ones making those decisions and working with their patient to give them the best care possible. So that applies across the board, I think. What the federal government can do is enforce the Canada Health Act. Like, we have a tool that says healthcare should be universal, it should be public, it should be there for people, it shouldn't be private, and it shouldn't be at the whims of premiers to say what should be covered or what shouldn't be covered. All healthcare should be covered appropriately, publicly, universally. And so we can use that tool and say, well, if you're not going to follow the principles of the Canada Health Act, there'll be repercussions.
I also wanted to ask you about, a lot of people I think are scared right now because of that backslide in rights. The trans community is seeing a backslide happening. There's rising anti-immigrant sentiment from outlets like, True North. What is your message to people who are scared right now? Like, how can you try to give them hope when they're seeing, the next few years ahead are going to be tough for a lot of vulnerable groups? What message do you have for them?
This is really important because I know a lot of people are feeling scared, and you kind of start to feel a sense of hopelessness, like there's really nothing that can get better. One of the things that I point to is in Canada, the Conservatives are considered to be really far ahead of us, and it is a serious challenge. They're at 40%. That means 60% of people in Canada don't want them. A majority of Canadians don't think that that's the right solution. So my invitation is, in this next election, we know that people at some point, want a change, whether they feel left behind or frustrated with the Liberals, let down by the Liberals. They're not going to give them another chance. So for people out there who feel worried about Conservatives and their rhetoric and their cuts, or worried about the fact that they're going to attack and marginalize people that are already vulnerable, whatever your reason is, if you want to stop the Conservatives, join us. We're ready to go. We have shown that we can deliver, and we want to fight back. I have this belief, something my mom taught me that gives me a lot of kind of optimism when I'm up against a big challenge. It's a phrase called chardi kala, and it means rising spirits in the face of hopeless odds. It's almost like a defiant optimism. And you kind of say it anytime someone asks you how you're doing. My mom would always say, I'm in chardi kala, use this phrase. And it's almost like trying to build in yourself this defiant optimism that I'm going to fight no matter what. And what we know is when we fight, we win. If we just sit back and do nothing, there's no chance we can win. But if we fight, if we come together, if we organize, we can win. And we have done that. Just to give people some hope, in Manitoba, New Democrats beat Conservatives. In BC, the Conservatives joined kind of with the Liberals, and New Democrats beat them. We saw the really hateful and divisive Conservatives in New Brunswick were defeated. So we can beat Conservatives. It can be done. And while folks feel a lot of maybe worry and despair about the States, I want people to channel that despair and say, well, we can make things better in Canada. Let's fight. Let's win.
Within Canada, we are seeing also a lot of anti-Indian racism these days. The Sikh community specifically is being really targeted. We are seeing disinformation posted from people like Harrison Faulkner from True North, who's sharing images claiming that people are defecating. It's just really nasty stuff. How does that feel as someone who is a powerful, visible member of this group? How does it feel to see Canadians speaking that way? And what message do you have for other people who might be feeling hurt by that?
Yeah, I mean, it's when we talk about the anti-immigrant sentiment in Canada, a lot of times it gets directed towards whoever is seen as the most common kind of immigrant. And a lot of times it's South Asian folks. It's folks of South Asian descent. And sometimes very visibly, Sikhs are very visible, so it happens. This is where like I really believe in the idea of solidarity. If someone's going to target people based on who they are, where they come from, it could be today they're targeting people based on their language. Tomorrow it could be targeting people based on their gender. Like anyone that wants to target someone and kind of divide us will choose one thing or another. You know, that saying where, you know, one day they came for, the priest was kind of sharing the story, one day they came for the folks that, you know, maybe wore a suit, and then the next day they came for the folks that wore t-shirts, and the next day they, you know, they came for all, and then there's no one left to stand up. We have to show solidarity in that people are not the problem. The problem that we're up against, where we can't afford groceries, you can't afford rent, you can't afford a home, it's because basically the systems have been designed to make the super rich even richer, and they are making a killing while people are hurting. We've got to change that. And I think all workers need to unite to say we are better off when we look out for one another and we take on those who are actually making our lives worse, those who are purposely benefiting off of our pain, who are benefiting off of this inequality. Let's take that on. And that's my message, is that we can come together, we can take these things on. It hurts to be targeted, it hurts to be singled out, but I have a real belief that a Canadian value, I think that rings true, is that people want to take care of their neighbor. They want to take care of the people around them. And when we do that, we get amazing things happen.
Speaking of, you know, sticking up, having each other's back, you went super viral. Yeah. For, you know, you really stood up for yourself outside of Parliament that one time. Some people thought that maybe things were going to get, you know, aggressive between you guys.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind in that moment?
Well, listen, I'm a little embarrassed by it. I have to admit.
Come on, it was authentic.
I grew up a scrapper. Like I grew up in a certain way that is not as relevant now that I'm maybe a leader. But I do fight for people all the time. It's something I care about. And so people might notice I've been accosted a lot. Honestly, day to day though, I get a lot of love from people too. So I'm very thankful for the work I get to do. I love that I can make a difference in people's lives. But that particular moment, what kind of triggered that whole thing was, for the past maybe 3 or 4 days leading up to that event, there had been a group of guys that were just harassing people. And it was coming back to me that often they were harassing women. They had harassed some of my MPs that were women. And so they were really targeting people that they thought they could get away with it. And what I've learned in my life is that bullies, they prey on weakness and they feel like they can push it because no one's going to stand up to them. And as soon as you stand up to them, often these type of people, they crumble. And so it just was at that moment, I'm like, you know what? Enough's enough. These folks have been harassing people too much. Let me show what's up. Let me show them what's up when someone stands up to them. And as you could see, they crumbled really quickly because these are people that don't actually want a confrontation. They want to bully someone around. They want to push people around, but they're not ready for it if they get it back. And that's what I guess we saw.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt that you know Brazilian jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been training my whole life. So like I wrestled, I did boxing and jiu-jitsu and wrestling. So yeah, I did lots of different martial arts.
Sweet. Okay, I only really have 2 more questions for you, but one of them I just realized I should have asked earlier because it would have made more sense. So I'm just gonna like shoehorn it in here.
Sure.
But you know, we see the news today about Canada Post, the fact that the government is recommending to the board that they be forced back to work until May. The Canada Post striking workers or locked out workers. What do you intend to do about that? Are you guys going to take any steps to oppose that? Are you willing to force a confidence vote over that kind of thing? What do you intend to do to protect workers here?
Well, this is what I've noticed from the Liberals. We've come out really clearly saying we'll never support back to work legislation. If you bring it in, even if you deem it a confidence vote, we'll vote against it. And so we've made it really clear, and they've not used back to work legislation, I feel, because we've made it clear where we stand and the jeopardy that it could be for them if they bring that type of bill or that type of law, knowing that it could be a confidence vote in and of itself. They haven't done that, but they've done these sneaky things. So this is another example where they're not actually forcing binding arbitration, for example, which is completely wrong. They're just kind of pushing the ball down the court, really. So it's like they're not willing to actually do the hard work of supporting workers to get a fair contract. They're just pushing the conflict kind of down into the future, which I think is a bit of a cop-out, and they're not actually doing the hard work. But it's weird because it's not taking away their right to strike, so they're still able to restrike afterwards. but it is undermining the work that's being done right now. So it's not something I think is the right approach. We're going to keep on fighting to say workers deserve to be able to negotiate their agreements. They should be able to go on strike. It's a tough decision for the workers. Being on strike is no fun. Like, you don't get pay. You are going through a lot of hardship in your family. It's tough. And they're doing it because they wanted fair wages, pensions that were the same for the previous workers as the new workers. And they wanted to be able to work in safe conditions. And that's what I think they deserve.
It sounds like my dog agrees. But in that vein, there is the fact that, Poilievre basically brings a new confidence vote like every 30 seconds. So you do have the ability to topple the government in one of those moments, and you could, communicate that it's related to either this or, say, liberals supporting Palestinians, the fact that there is an ongoing, according to several UN experts, genocide taking place there. Are you willing to take those kinds of steps to put the pressure on the government to support workers and oppose genocide?
Yeah, we've been using the tools that we have to push to say Canada should recognize what's going on for the seriousness that it is. We were the first party to call for a ceasefire. Canada refused to acknowledge that position. We called for that basically a week after what we saw happening, or maybe even days after we saw what was happening, that we needed to as a country, take that position. And since then, we've been saying we got to stop the genocide that's occurring. And so we really want to see Canada take a stronger position. We've been advocates for that and pushing for that. For workers' rights, we have been unequivocal. I've been showing up to picket lines and saying that we're going to back up workers no matter what. All that, and then we got Pierre Poilievre and that kind of non-confidence games. I've said I don't want to play their games because I know what they're all about. The Conservatives want to cut. They want to cut the health care that we've been getting for people, the dental care. They want to cut the free birth control, which we think is fundamentally important to give people better access. They don't want that to start. And we know that there's already provinces that are lining up. We're really close to a number of agreements. I want to see that benefit get to people. I want to see people get free birth control, free diabetes medication. So there's work that I want to see done, and I don't want to trigger an election for the Conservatives to benefit, like for them to kind of play their games. Like, I don't want to fall into their games. There will be an election, 100%. 2025, there's going to be an election. And in that election, people will have a really important choice. And I want people to look at that choice and say, like, what is better for you? The Conservatives want to cut the things you need, or New Democrats want to make your life better, make your life more affordable. That's the choice I'm going to put to people, and we're going to be there very soon.
Are you going to lead the NDP into that election?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, that's pretty much all the questions that I had for you. I'll give you a second because, I have a decent following on TikTok, as long as it exists. Do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I've actually forgot to look right at the camera. Yeah, hi, folks. Can I say a couple of really cute things? There is a very beautiful, cute dog that's down by our feet that's creating a very cozy environment down there. So I just want to point that out. I am just really honored to be able to have the time to be able to chat with Rachel, to chat with you. It's been really good. For folks out there, I'm also going to get back on TikTok soon.
Oh.
So a little teaser here. I'll be getting back on soon. So hopefully I'll see you there. And I don't know, just for folks that are feeling worried and feeling a little despair, I get that feeling, I get that worry. I want to give you hope. I wanted you to know, I've been in lots of fights where people told me there's no way. People told us there's no way you can get in dental care. It can't happen. A new program to cover people for their teeth, not possible. We got it done. People told us there's no way you can bring in pharmacare. Impossible. We got that done. So people have told me my whole life it's impossible. And it's only impossible until someone does it. People say it can't be done until you get it done. So we can take them on. We can take on the Conservatives. If you've got that sense that you feel worried, channel that worry into action. Join us if you can, and we can make some beautiful things happen.
There you go. Jagmeet Singh, folks. Thanks for watching.